All right, so let's look and deal with some differences here. So here I got three of the most common economic systems. There's a fourth one off camera that I'm going to bring back when I come to it. But I'm going to explain to you the difference between socialism, capitalism, corporatism, and off-screen communism. All right? So, first off, we have to understand that there's a difference between standard socialism. All right? So we have standard socialism. All right? And then we have Marxist socialism. All right? Standard socialism basically includes any form of an economy that is built around benefiting the working class of people. All right? So, anything benefiting workers. All right. So under standard socialism, we've got syndicalism, mutualism, all right, we got syndicalism, mutualism, and distributism, etc. All right. So there is more under standard socialism, but Marxist socialism is also under standard socialism. Really what Marxist socialism is all right, think about it this way. So Marxist socialism requires a government. So it requires a government. All right? So Marxist socialism requires a government. It is also, all right, so let's make that number one. All right? So number one, it requires a government. Number two, all right, it is centrally planned. All right? Now that's going to get really interesting when we look at communism. This centrally planned thing is really big deal, all right? It's a really big deal to have this centrally planned. And actually that a lot of people say that the success of socialism in world history was almost solely due to the fact that the economy was centrally planned. And that in terms of raw GDP, central planning does appear to be more effective. However, there are, again, advantages and disadvantages. So, let's go number three. All right. Fully nationalized. All right. Now, Marxist socialism is fully nationalized, centrally planned, requires a government, but technically, and I'm going to say 0.4. I'm going to say 0.4 right here. Democratically organized. All right? So, sometimes it is democratically organized. It's not required to be democratically organized. However, according to orthodox Marxism, it does have to be democratically organized. But not all socialist countries have been democratically organized. But all socialist countries have had a government, did have a centrally planned economy, and had a fully nationalized economy. They also typically focused on democratic organization. For example, the USSR was all three of these things, but Cambodia did not include the fourth. All right, Cambodia did not include the fourth, but the USSR actually included all these things. So, what does democratically organized mean? Because I know y'all are probably cringing. All right, so y'all are thinking USSR, and you're thinking that was not democratic. What is democratically organized is the economy. We're not talking about the government of socialist countries. We're talking about the economy of socialist countries. So that meant that the workplace was democratically organized in the USSR. That cannot be denied. It was democratically organized in the USSR, meaning if you are a worker in the USSR, you could literally hire your manager. All right? So that is socialism, but this is not required because it was not present in Cambodia. All right? So now let's move on to capitalism. Now, capitalism is not what you think. All right? Capitalism, I would actually consider a form of standard socialism, but not Marxist socialism. Now, that's my personal conviction. However, most people do not see it that way, and so I put a separate entry on it. Capitalism, when I'm referring to capitalism, I'm specifically referring to Austrian economics or similar schools. All right? So, what is that? Basically, capitalism is, all right, so capitalism is laissez-faire. All right, laissez-faire or fair or whatever. Laissez-faire. Capitalism is laissez-faire. All right, and what laissez-faire means, laissez-faire means leave us alone. All right, leave us alone. All right, now, there is a laissez-faire capitalism. So laissez-faire capitalism means there are absolutely no restrictions. It's the purest form of laissez-faire, leave us alone. But there are other forms. For example, classical liberalism is a form of slightly regulated. All right, so slightly regulated capitalism. All right. All right. And then we have another ideology. That's anarcho-capitalism. Anarcho-capitalism is taking laissez-faire to the extreme. It's combining anarchism with capitalism. All right. And really laissez-faire capitalism at that. Basically, a lot of ANCAPs also subscribe to the egoist thought. So they are typically chaos lovers. So, but they don't believe they're chaos lovers because they believe the invisible hand of the market will create order. It's what they call the rational consumer. All right. So basically, the rational consumer. All right. Let's draw a little stick figure. All right. Rational consumer keeps order. through the NAP, or the non-aggression principle. All right, so NAP, non-aggression principle. All right, and I didn't mean to put two L's there, but that just happened. Basically, they believe that if you are a rational consumer in a laissez-faire capitalist society, then law and order will still be maintained because there is something called the non-aggression principle that will be put in place to protect people and their interests from the aggression of crazy people. All right? Basically, what the non-aggression principle says is that once it is broken, it allows for retaliation, either by the individual themselves or by, all right, let's say this, either by the individual themselves or by the community. All right, so community. Now, not all capitalists are ANCAPs. So not all capitalists follow the non-aggression principle, but the most extreme capitalists are ANCAPs. There are an example of more moderate capitalists are classical liberals. The United States was originally founded from classical liberal principles. Now, they weren't very refined classical liberal principles, but they were still classical liberal principles. All right, now let's move on to the other form of what we call capitalism. All right, corporatism. Now, corporatism is ugly. Corporatism is the economic system of fascism. So corporatism equals fascism or feudalism. All right, feudalism is the more extreme form, but fascism, basically corporatism, is where most capitalist countries are now. We are not in a capitalist, chances are, if you consider yourself in a capitalist country, you're not actually in a capitalist country, you're in a corporatist country. All right? So what is the difference between capitalism and corporatism? Well, basically, where capitalism says, all right, we're just going to let the market do its thing, we're not going to touch the market. Corporatism says that the government, all right, the government, all right, has a mutual relationship, all right, I'm going to use that as a mutual relationship with companies. All right, so the government has a mutual relationship with companies. Okay, so what does that mean? How does that work? What's going on here? Well, first off, let's look in a let's take a look at both a fascist and feudalistic state. All right, your classic fascist. So we got the dictatorial pyramid, and if you don't know what this is, you can look at the last video. And you got the feudalistic pyramid. All right. Now, under fascism and corporatism, what this part is called is different. So under fascism, it's called companies. Under feudalism, it's called merchants, all right? So under both systems, they try to control their citizens through legal power, all right? But, and coercion. Coercion, All right? But the problem is, forcible coercion is not enough for some people. Some people are more rebellious than that. For some people, the threat of violence is not enough to control them. So, the government relies on companies to hand over some of that control of the citizenry to the government. So, government uses force. Companies use coercion. All right, so what's the difference between force and coercion? Force is a gun to your head. Coercion is your eviction notice. All right? Force is a gun to your head. Coercion is your eviction notice. Both of these things force you to do things, but they force you to do things in different ways. The government does not have the ability to coerce, and companies do not have the ability to force. Sometimes they give each other the ability to mingle, but that is given over. Companies obtain what they want through government force, and the government obtains what they want through company coercion. All right? But what this does is it creates a primary difference between corporatism and capitalism that's immediately visible. Corporatism builds monopolies. Capitalism does not. Capitalism does not build monopolies. It is almost impossible to create a natural monopoly under capitalism. But corporatism creates monopolies on the daily. Even if there are anti-monopoly laws, there are still companies that end up becoming practical monopolies, where they practically control an entire industry, but they don't technically remove all the competition. That is fascism. Feudalism, the primary difference between fascism and feudalism in this case is that with fascism tries to hide it. Fascism tries to still tell everybody, hey, you can make your own company and you can make it big theoretically. But feudalism, they're just like, lol, no. Those merchants inherit their position, and you can't have any part of that. So, capitalism and corporatism make up right-wing politics, all right? But we kind of left off on socialism. So what is the other form of socialism? Well, the other form of socialism, that's communism. All right? So, again, just like socialism, there is standard socialism and Marxist socialism. Well, just like that, there is standard communism and Marxist communism. All right? Standard communism is any radical form of Socialism. All right. Marxist communism requires a few things. All right. So, first off, Marxist communism, number one, requires anarchism. All right. So Marxist communism requires anarchism. Contrast that with Marxist socialism. So under Marxism, Marxism didn't distinguish between capitalism and corporatism, but we can infer certain things. So first off, under Marxism believed that modern economies began with feudalism, slowly turning fascist until they eventually became classical liberal and then back to fascist. All right? So then he believed that when capitalism went back to fascism, that was called late stage capitalism. Now, currently we are in that stage. We are in the stage where almost, if not all, quote unquote, capitalist countries have turned corporatist in some way or another. Every single one of them. So, Marx predicted that when that happens, there will be a series of revolutions all over the world, if not a whole world revolution, that will lead to socialism. All right? So socialism requires a government. All right? Communism, he then predicted after socialism began to collapse, then communism would show up. The thing is, when people say Marxism never worked, Marx would agree with you. Marx would agree with you that Marxism never worked, because the only form of Marxism we've ever seen is socialism. We've never seen communism. It's designed to fail in a way that will produce communism. So, socialism requires government. Communism requires anarchism. All right? So, number two. Decentrally planned. Decentrally planned. All right? So, what is decentralized planning? All right? So, let's contrast that with socialism again. Centrally planned, decentrally planned. So, what's the difference between centrally planned and decentrally planned? Well, first off, we have central planning. All right? Let's just call it central. All right? So, central means someone from the top makes a plan that everybody in the community follows. All right? Decentral means that the majority of the community makes individual plans. Let's fill out these plans to show that they're different than the people's heads. And that these plans come together to form regional plans. And finally, these regional plans come together to make a national plan. Or, in the ideal scenario, if we're going by classical Marxism, by the time the communist stage happens, it would be not just the national plan, it would be the global plan, the global economic plan. All right? So, central is where somebody from the top makes a plan for everybody else to follow. Decentral is where people make their own individual plans for their own individual workplaces, and then those plans turn into regional plans, and then those plans merge to form a grand central economic plan. All right? So 3 is actually the same as in socialism. Fully nationalized. All right, all industry is fully nationalized. All right. So all industry is fully nationalized under communism and socialism. But because of the decentral planning, it doesn't feel quite as top-down controlling you. And then we have number 4. Now this one actually is required under communism. All right, this number 4 one is actually required, and that is direct democracy in the workplace. Now, that's different from democratically organized. So what's the difference? Well, if you watched my earlier video on the on the authoritarian libertarian spectrum, you will know that direct democracy basically means that there are no rulers. That direct democracy occurs when there are no rulers, which goes perfectly with anarchism. But direct democracy in the workplace basically means that within the workplace there are no bosses. All right? Now, sometimes it might be necessary to default to a more democratic system. That's why socialism comes first, then communism, is because communism builds off of socialism. All right? So basically, if the job requires things to be democratic, then it will be democratic. But most of the time, the job is not going to require things to be democratic. It's going to allow for direct democracy. All right. So let's review, and I'm going to use the blue color. I'm going to use fancy blue color. Socialism is anything that is benefiting the workers. That is standard socialism. All right? Same applies to standard communism. All right, same as socialism. Okay. Marxist socialism builds off of what he refers to as feudalistic corporatism, then capitalism, then fascistic corporatism, then socialism, then communism. That is Marxism. So, Marxism, what am I doing? Equals feudalism, then capitalism, then fascism, then socialism, then communism. All right? So that's Marxism. Capitalism is laissez-faire, which means leave us alone. Capitalism can be classical liberal or anarcho-capitalist. All right? Classical liberal or anarcho-capitalist. Anarcho-capitalism, which I'm going to shorten to ANCAP, follows the NAP, or the non-aggression principle. All right? Corporatism is when the government has a mutual relationship with companies, where the government uses force and companies use coercion. Corporatism, the biggest difference between corporatism and capitalism is that corporatism builds monopolies. Capitalism cannot build monopolies. Finally, we have communism. Communism changes central planning from to decentral planning. So, from central to decentral, it requires anarchism, it is fully nationalized just like socialism, and it implements direct democracy. And I'm going to put a little asterisk here. When possible. Alright, I hope you liked this video. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. See y'all later.